Now to the story. Places of worship, sacred spaces, have for centuries been sanctuaries, with doors always open to welcome anyone who needs shelter or safety. But increasingly, this is not the case. This past weekend, a gang entered a church in the Joburg city centre and robbed congregants. So, will churches have to start closing their doors more and more? Let's discuss this now with Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana of the South African Council of Churches. Bishop, thank you so much for your time. I wonder, first of all, if you have any more information about what happened at this CBD Joburg church over the weekend. Do you know if anyone was hurt? Have any arrests been made?
No, it's definitely no arrests have been made. Mercifully, no one was physically hurt. I spoke to Pastor Nchangas, who was the senior pastor of that congregation, and the real issue is the trauma that people are feeling. And the church arranged for counseling yesterday, on Sunday, and in fact, Pastor Nchangas himself was going for today for his own attention.
Which is
it is very traumatic. What is very traumatic is exactly what we began with, that churches are open to everyone. It's never been a place that's closed to people. And we made exactly this point during COVID when we were asked to make sure that only vaccinated people will come to worship. We said we can't do that because anyone and everyone should be able to come to pour out their lives before the Lord. And so we can't do that. Now, this happens. And as Pastor Nchangas puts it, we don't have the capacity to protect ourselves. We cannot have enough police to be posted in every worship space in South Africa. That's just not an issue. We don't have the money to hire private security. And so we are totally vulnerable. It is a vulnerability that I think makes for this traumatic fear of people going to worship. Will they be safe?
Absolutely. And, often a church is a place where someone will go when they're trying to deal with their trauma and they feel it's a place where they can be vulnerable. And the mere act of worship means that you're making yourself vulnerable in many ways. So the trauma that you speak of with the congregants, that is a very difficult thing for them to overcome. I understand the pastor was actually giving his sermon or at the lectern at the time when the robbers entered the church. Does your clergy get training on how to handle crime situations? Is this something perhaps you're going to have to start doing?
No. I don't know that any church or any... Remember that when we talk about churches, we should also take into account all the other faiths. This could have been a Jewish shul, it could have been a Muslim mosque, it could have been a Hindu temple. All of us are at one on these things. In fact, we have a lot of interfaith communication and exchange of experiences. So this applies to all of us. And it does not relate to membership of the South African Council of Churches. And in fact, the church in Diepsloot that was attacked last month is not in the South African Council of Churches. This particular church is not in the South African Council of Churches. But we care that all places of worship remain safe spaces for South Africans because of the pastoral needs that people have in their own lives that need to have the churches open and able to serve their interests. I think that, I've been trying to figure out in my own mind whether there isn't a pattern here, because last month it was Diepsloot, and not only did they attack for robbery, they killed Pastor Mzila. They killed Pastor Mzila. They also injured people that were hospitalized. Now, a month later, this happens in the city of Johannesburg. And you would just wonder whether there isn't maybe an emerging syndicate of church robbers that they are looking for what we call soft targets, people that for sure will not be armed, they will not defend themselves. And they will be there will be a number of them so that you can get as many cell phones in one place or, whatever machines, and they've got handbags. You can get whatever you want. And I then say to myself, if this happens, what are the chances it's going to happen at a hospital while people are waiting for services? Because these thugs seem to think that soft targets is the place to go. And I think that we have to appeal appeal to communities. Churches belong to communities. We appeal to communities to be the eyes and ears of churches and protect them because it is their service. And that maybe we can, that way, be able to get some protection.
Yeah, I mean, appealing to people to try and take more of an interest in making sure that a church or a place of faith and worship is looked after is certainly something that has to be done. But as a faith community, and you make the point, of course, this impacts all faiths, but as a faith community, are there certain interventions, more concrete interventions that you're considering? For example, I don't know how many churches still keep their doors open during the day, but you should still be able to walk into a church and just sit for a quiet moment if that's what you need. What are the discussions around some concrete interventions that you might find are becoming increasingly necessary?
I can tell you that, excuse me, I had several calls after the Deep Fluid experience. But after this last weekend, I had so many calls from church leaders, saying what can be done. It does say that we need to have a meeting to actually discuss these measures ourselves. We have not done that before. But I can say that it's unlikely that if you went into church as a single person for your personal need, you'd get the same attack as you'd have if you are in a group of worshippers. I suspect that this really will be a problem for the worship times in our congregations. And so we're obviously going to talk about it and then be able to say, maybe make one appeal or the other. But I think for me, the most important appeal right now is to our communities, because these thieves live in our communities. We know them. And somebody must know somebody. And so we are appealing for every support that can be given to law enforcement to apprehend, because we need to have one arrest of a group like this to at least send the message to the others, don't do this. I mean, what really hurts me most is that the only time that we had churches feeling vulnerable and unsafe was under apartheid. You know, Sally, that churches were attacked those days for standing for the truth. How can this happen in democracy? How can churches become a place of terror rather than a place of peace?
Yeah, it's absolutely tragic, and it's a sign of the times. You just have to look at the latest crime stats. That these soft targets, as you rightly point out, where people are at their most relaxed and vulnerable, are increasingly.
I just want to make one point, Sally.
Yes.
And that maybe we need to bring into those prayers this theme of the churches having to take on the vulnerability of women, and practically, as we fear these thoughts coming into our churches, how often do girls and women walk freely without fear? It is exactly that fear that Pastor Njanga was talking about. People are going to be afraid to come to church.
You make such an excellent point, and through empathy, I think, comes action and perhaps some solutions. Thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. Much appreciated. That, of course, was Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana from the South African Council of Churches. Still to come.